How's it going, Publius?
Quite well, Mod. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Okay, we can start. The first question is in the questions channel, and that's by Alia Sector, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he's asking basically about, what happened in season 7,563, and I believe he's referring to the recent, not the recent peg, but the one that just happened before it. And his question is the following: what made the price abruptly return to peg for a while after days hovering slightly under peg and trending down, and the soil accumulating in the field? Overall, it seems that the protocol is quite good in preventing deflation, and by deflation he means that the price, depegs upwards, but not as good in preventing inflation, which is if the price is below 1 going back to 1. The answer, of course, is convert, but do you want to maybe summarize that, Publius, on how convert works?
Sure. So in addition to the field, which functions as the credit facility of Beanstalk and the primary, from a macroeconomic perspective, the primary creator of long-term stability in the bean price, because as long as Beanstalk can borrow enough beans from the market over time to remove enough beans from the supply to return the price to $1, it can create price stability. The silo has also been, over time, upgraded by the Dow to also become a major part of peg maintenance. And the introduction of conversions within the silo from beans to LP when the price is too high, and from LP to beans when the price is too low, have created a way for farmers that have silo exposure, that don't intend to withdraw their silo exposure, to also participate in peg maintenance by effectively buying and selling beans when they're too high and too low, respectively. And so Convert has, since it was introduced in December of last year, been a major driver, at least in our opinion, and if you look at the data, we think it reflects similarly, a major driver of the decrease in price volatility of beans since it was introduced in December. And so that's maybe to answer the first question. Now, with regards to the comment about the protocol is good at preventing deflation, but not as good at preventing inflation. Well, of course that's true. It's very easy for any protocol to prevent deflation. All you got to do is print more of it. So that's a really easy thing to prevent. In general, the thing that's much harder to do is preventing inflation. So in general, we agree Beanstalk could certainly be better at preventing inflation, but think that, and it's also not as good at everything you say is true. It's not as good at preventing inflation as deflation, but that will always be the case. And so that's kind of like a truism in the case of a system like Beanstalk without collateral. So from our perspective, the goal is always to try to figure out ways to further improve Beanstalk's ability to prevent unwanted inflation. But otherwise, this is kind of just the name of the game, or the structure of a system like Beanstalk, where there's no collateral, and therefore it's very easy to prevent deflation, but very difficult to prevent inflation. That's just the nature of the beast.
Okay, so Bean was back to peg because a participant, or maybe a group of participants, converted and brought the price back to 1 by converting LP to Bean. Is there a reason why that happened in a specific time, or the answer to that depends on the participant themselves? So, every person will decide by their own when do they think it's worth their while to convert?
Well, a couple things. One, I think one of the things that's relevant here is that in their comment they said they don't know anything about blockchain analysis. There are a ton of tools that are available that are designed to make it as easy as possible for everyone, whether they have technical experience or not, to try to understand what's going on within Beanstalk. So there are lots of bots in Discord and within the Beanstalk Discord, and there's also Telegram bots where you can track all of the events that are happening within Beanstalk, and think that that's generally a very helpful resource that people should reference if they're looking to try to follow things and make sense of what's going on. In general, it's very hard to. I think in some cases it's easier to tell. Oh, like look, this wallet continues to do X, Y, and Z, or this bot is doing A, B, and C. But in the case of the convert that we saw this week in particular, there wasn't any sort of. There was one big convert that we all saw that brought the price back generally to the peg, and then there were still some sales, and then a couple more converts. And don't think that, although I'd have to confirm this, I don't think that the second set of converts came from the same wallet as the first set of converts, and I guess the first wallet that converted. Not sure if it was the same as the wallets that converted later on, or how many wallets converted later on, because frankly haven't been following it that closely. This afternoon we noticed or at least I noticed the repeg this afternoon, and then Publius mentioned that we'd actually been printing all evening, so hadn't even been tracking it that closely on this end, so don't have any real insights on what led to the repeg in particular.
All right. After that incident happened, there was a bit of a discussion in the general chat or on Discord, and there was a little bit, let's say, of a negative sentiment on those who converted when the price of Bean was above 1. And the thinking behind that was, why convert? Why not have a group mentality where all of us wait and let the protocol to keep on printing or minting? That sort of reminded me of the 3-3 mentality, which is if we all come in together, we will let the protocol print and print and print, and then all of us will accumulate like more beans. What do you think about that in general, Publius?
Well, in general, Beanstalk is designed to create peg maintenance, assuming that there are lots of independent actors that are competitive with one another. And at the same time, Beanstalk should also be able to create price stability in an environment where there is widespread coordination to try to depeg Beanstalk, whether that's upward or downward. And the reality is that the upward and downside volatility in terms of the incentives of convert can be further improved or refined, where there probably is some healthy rate of inflation of the bean supply where it isn't advantageous for Beanstalk to incentivize converts above the peg. To the earlier comment from Elias Hector, alias Hector, Beanstalk is probably incentivized to pay a premium to minimize downside price volatility, and is to some extent less concerned with short-term upside price volatility from a peg maintenance perspective, which would Beanstalk pay a premium to prioritize, certainly minimizing downside price volatility from our perspective. So there is a question as to what's like the optimal either inflation rate for beans or an optimal silo APY that Beanstalk should target. Currently, Beanstalk is totally neutral in terms of its incentives to convert above and below the peg, and think that that's something that can certainly be refined, perhaps in terms of some grown stock bonus, perhaps, as well as the stock gauge system that's been discussed previously, but some sort of variable grown stock bonus depending on time above or below peg, that could potentially be used to further refine the ability for Beanstalk to encourage converts when it wants. Not sure whether we have a strong opinion on whether the converts, whether it makes sense for people to try to unite to prevent converts. Don't think it's really possible, given just the large amount of farmers. It would be hard from our perspective to expect people to just stop converting. That doesn't really make sense, given that there is an incentive to convert for individuals. Now, at what price it makes sense for individuals to convert, that's kind of up to the market to decide. We saw it took a little bit of time for price discovery on converting back up, and think we also then saw some price discovery on sell pressure below the peg, and at least for the moment, it seems like all of the bean supply that was willing to be unloaded below $1 has now been unloaded. And so now there's some price discovery around people selling their beans above $1. And that can be from converts, or that can just be from people selling beans for whatever reason. So that doesn't necessarily just extend to the silo in this case. And it'll be interesting to see now that, again, at least for the time being, the price has returned to $1, whether what type of supply there is, or marginal supply at given prices, and what type of convert demand there is. It's just interesting from our perspective to watch, but not really. I mean, we're never going to come out and give a recommendation on what people should be doing. Instead, we think it's much more imperative that the economics of the protocol are tested out in the wild, and totally unbiased by any sort of recommendations on our part. So it's certainly not going to advise people on whether that makes sense or not. But at the same time, think it's certainly interesting. And as people do whatever they do based on what they're incentivized to do, the DAO should probably continue to improve the peg maintenance model. But that's a continuous process, at least for the time being. There seem to be a lot of different pieces that can be improved to further refine the convert incentives a little bit more specifically. And one open macro question is there a target APY that the system should target, perhaps? Maybe it's the risk-free treasury yield, for example, right? If beans are pegged to $1, it's hard to justify holding beans as opposed to dollars if the risk-free rate is higher than the rate in beans. So there's some question of competitiveness and whether the system needs to care about that, or whether the system can afford that. These are open questions that are on our mind, at least.
Is there a difference between farmers coming together or uniting and deciding, for example, not to sell to keep the protocol minting, versus passing a BIP and just minting and paying everyone?
Yes, certainly, because in the case of a BIP, you simply need a majority of stock, whereas in the case of not converting, you would need every single participant not to do that. So to a large extent, it's easier to do things via BIP.
All right. Continuing, I guess, from that discussion, and it's kind of related to it, and we're talking about seeds now. And as we know, in today's model, LPs have 4 seeds, and then just holding beans, you have 2 seeds. What is the thinking between having LP being 4 seeds? Is it only that when new participants come in, they have a choice to either just buy beans or buy LP, and then you have an incentive to go for an LP because it's 4 seeds? Or it's also that while you're in the silo, converting, or it impacts basically an incentive to convert the seeds? I'll rephrase the question. Do seeds only play a role when you're entering the silo? And by seeds, I mean the difference between LP and beans. Or it also plays a role while you're in the silo already?
Well, it obviously plays a role all the time, right? You're constantly making decisions, if you're a farmer in the silo, whether or not you want LP or beans. And to that extent, the main question then becomes, given that is a factor, whether or not it's a factor that Beanstalk should use to create some sort of improvement in peg maintenance. And as has been often discussed by the DAO, and as far as we understand it, is now started to be in development. It's still probably this is now Q1 hopefully, but at some point the hope is to implement a gauge system for seeds where the amount of grown stock from a given deposit based on BDV, or in practice the seeds for a given deposit, fluctuates. What that will fluctuate based on is unclear at the moment, but at least the architecture to have changing seeds over time, that's being developed as part of the next upgrade, or part of the next upgrade to the silo, and that it should be implemented in a way, hopefully, that the way that the way that seeds can be changed over time is generally very flexible, and then that's a separate economics question that the DAO can answer.
All right. Last question about seeds, and that comes from 0Gs. And maybe the question, we kind of know the answer to it, but I couldn't find the graph that supports it. And that is about, stock accruing through seeds through time plateaus eventually. Publius, can you maybe help us with the formula, or even if I remember seeing that graph somewhere, if we can drop it to show that with time, eventually the stock accrued through time plateaus. Or maybe without showing the graph, just take us through the understanding of it. Why is it that stock plateaus, stock accrued or growing through seeds plateaus through time or with time?
So currently, stock grows linearly in perpetuity. So it doesn't tail off in terms of the grown stock. However, what currently is the key, and that may be something that should change over time, where the amount of grown stock is no longer linear and older deposits get less of a bonus. However, the effect that is already in place but could be improved by changing the stock to no longer be linear, but to decrease in the amount that has grown over time, is the effect that if I deposit today and X time goes by, and then tomorrow you deposit, or X time goes by, and then you deposit the same BDV mod, I will have some grown stock corresponding to X time. However, when another X goes by, so now we're at 2X from when I deposited, the amount of grown stock that I have is 2X, and you now have X. And when another X goes by, so we're at 3X, I'm at 3X, and you're at 2X. And therefore, because everyone's stock grows linearly, the relative benefit for having deposited earlier decreases relative to other farmers, but on an individual basis, from an opportunity cost perspective, continues to increase. And so there is some reason why the grown stock should continue to grow from seeds in perpetuity, but there's a question as to whether or not that grown stock needs to grow forever. Or not, well, it should probably grow forever, but whether it needs to grow linearly forever, or whether it should decrease. And to that point, while there is an open question as to whether grown stock should be used as a bonus in some way to encourage additional conversions, it should probably be factored in that at some point that may favor certain participants that can convert faster, or have some sort of execution improvements over everyday farmers, and in that case, if the way that grown stock is rewarded is not done in a way where it isn't, basically the punchline is you can't have it such that any individual participant can accrue too much grown stock from their participation in peg maintenance. So the stock system needs to continue to be generally decentralizing in ownership over time, and that's something that should be a consideration as all of these different additional bells and whistles to peg maintenance can be added, or thought to be added.
Do you think there is an argument to be made that conversion, there's enough incentive for conversion through the price and not seeds? So when you convert, you're converting by arbitraging the price of bean, and that's enough of an incentive?
Yes, I think that argument is perfectly valid. From a theoretical perspective, I think that the real question becomes, what is Beanstalk really optimizing around? Currently, Beanstalk optimizes around price, and it optimizes around the pod rate. And it optimizes around whether or not the price is above or below $1, but not really the magnitude in any way, purely just whether the price is above or below $1. And with regards to the pod rate, it does optimize slightly around magnitude because you have multiple different classifications for the pod rate, or 4 different ones as opposed to just 2 for the price. But nonetheless, there's no action that Beanstalk takes to like exigently lower the pod rate. Again, it's not focused on the magnitude of the deviations of the pod rate per se in an explicit way, nor is it focused on the time of the deviations of price. Or you got a call. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Where did I lose you?
The last bit was it doesn't optimize or it doesn't look into the pod rate anymore.
The concept is that it doesn't focus on time or magnitude. It's purely just focused on the values themselves at the moment. And there is a question as to whether the protocol, from a theoretical perspective, should start to optimize not just around the raw values, but around the time and the magnitude of deviations along the price and the debt level axes. Those are like philosophical questions around the model.
Okay. Harry Smith asks a question of when, if there has been any updates or any developments on the wells.
So there's lots of work happening, but and maybe if Publius wants to come up and chat about it, feel free. But 2 minutes before class started, Mango Markets were hacked, and it was a problem with their oracles. And so from our perspective, there's no rush to implement the oracles. The focus is to do them properly so that they have as much generalized utility as possible, and really just want to get it right. So while we appreciate the question, this is not gonna, we're not rushing it. So don't have any updated timeline. There's a lot of work happening on that front, but it's a work in progress.
Okay. We're at the end of the town hall chat questions. So let's give it some time and see if folks have other questions. And all questions are welcome. Whether it's something that we've already been discussing or, we haven't addressed.
I think there was another question from Elias Hector in questions channel.
Right. Okay. So he asks, any ideas why the available soil was bought at the same time bean was returned to peg, in those seasons?
Well, I wasn't paying that close attention, but I would guess that once the price has been converted to peg, the expectation is that there's going to be less soil the following season, and therefore someone sows. Whereas before, if the price is below peg, there's an expectation that there's no rush to sow because there's some active price discovery happening, and therefore there was no rush to sow. And there is something to be said for perhaps there does need to be some decrease in the available soil in close to real time based on converts, because it's not necessarily efficient for Beanstalk to lend beans at that point.
I'm also not sure if that was the case, but if I was to take a guess, maybe there is some bot or a soil bot that looks at a certain and prices one of the inputs to it.
Again, I'm making it up, so I wasn't paying that close attention, but that would be what makes sense.
Me neither. I'm not sure if it was a bot or not. Okay, we'll give it some time, and folks, please feel free to drop your questions in the town hall chat.
Cool. Also, just while we have everyone, would just kind of shout out. There's lots of like dev work that can be done, and so if you're a dev or know a really high quality dev that wants to work on or around Beanstalk, like definitely reach out to us or Mod or Chad or anyone, because there's lots going on. So we're really excited about it and think there's lots of jobs on the bean farm at the moment as we understand it. So want to help just make a shout out and facilitate that.
And that's across different skills, whether it's front end, back end, and so on.
Video production, all sorts of shit.
Definitely video production. If anyone knows or anyone does videos, reach out to me. All right, Tyler B asks, what do you think about Beanstalk offering bean loans? Is this something that is possible to be done in the future?
So I have a lot of thoughts, but they're really not well formed, and am currently, I think we're just doing our research basically on how this should, how loans on or around Beanstalk should generally function, or how we think they should function. I think it's a huge economics question, and as we've always said, this is an economics experiment. And I mean, to be perfectly frank, this was one of those questions that when originally designing the core peg maintenance model, it was like, well, this is one of those questions that you hope to be able to at some point spend the time to answer because it's like the next question after you have some decentralized, non-collateralized stablecoin. It's like, well, now how do you have derivatives and lending, more importantly, a money market on top of it? It's an incredibly fun question to be thinking about, and we're doing some reading and homework, and are excited to hopefully within the next couple months be able to talk about this in an eloquent or thoughtful manner. But at the moment, really just feel like we're still doing our homework and don't have any strong thoughts. But one thing that is for sure is it's impossible to prevent these things from happening, and therefore it's just a question of what, if anything, should be a part of Beanstalk, or how should things be built in such a way that it's as likely as possible that Beanstalk can over the long run create peg maintenance. But the point is, the core peg maintenance model is the focus, and derivatives and money markets and all sorts of other shit. And I say that with a smile on my face. That it should really all be secondary to the peg maintenance model, and therefore, from our perspective, we're more inclined to work with others that are going to build this stuff on top of Beanstalk and try to encourage them to build stuff that is permissionless and zero fee. And I think Root's doing a great job of that, kind of leading the way. And Beansprout has accelerated that a lot, and we're very thrilled with all that progress. But in general, from our perspective right now, a lot of our brain power is still on really trying to get to the bottom of some of those theoretical questions around what should Beanstalk be optimizing around, and what are the right tools to do that, and then how to create a scalable architecture that can facilitate that. And these are all open questions. So the money market it's a major one, and it's a different question. It's my bedside reading at the moment is about money markets, just personally. So it's something that I'm thinking about lots, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. That at least I don't think I'll have any particularly eloquent thoughts in the next week or two. I'd be shocked, but continuing to think about it constantly.
The next question comes from Cryptodurse, and he asks if Publius has looked into chicken bonds and whether it is applicable to Beanstalk.
Took a brief look at it. Thought it was cool. It uses a lot of the similar incentive structures as the. I mean, it to some extent had some. I'm not remembering whether it was the silo or the field, but it had some Beanstalk-like elements. I think it was the silo, and I could be wrong about that. I'm making it up. I shouldn't talk if I'm just talking out of my ass. But at the time, thought it was pretty cool, and
I can maybe help with a refresher.
Yeah, help me out, man.
their idea was that people come in together, and then they all accrue whatever yield is there. But if someone leaves before a certain time period, then they just leave with their principal capital and they leave their yield to others. So if you chicken out, you leave your yield.
Oh yeah. That's fun stuff. I mean, from our perspective, things like that are they're cool. In theory, when implemented permissionlessly and believe that the chicken bonds they can be done as like a wrapper on top of beans in a pretty easy fashion, probably. Maybe on top of roots in a really easy fashion, because roots are an ERC20 token. So that could be like a fun thing that could be done, but don't really have any thoughts as to how it could be applied to the peg maintenance model or the money market per se.
And CryptoDoors, the Beanpod we did a podcast with the chicken bonds or the liquidity team, so that could be something for you to listen to if interested. CryptoDoors asks, when will the voice mod be back?
It's just a pain in the ass to have to carry it around, like this huge microphone. So it probably won't be back. We were really committed to the anonymity, guys. Like we're in it for Beanstalk, So to some extent, it's like at this point there's so much pretense around going back to the voice mode. It's like, what are we doing? So appreciate the spirit of it. I'm sure you guys are sick and tired of hearing my voice. So certainly, I'm sorry about that. But what are you gonna
do? Definitely not. Austin asks, theoretically, when does it make sense for a protocol or a marketplace to denominate things in beans versus denominate in roots, assuming that roots is FBDV?
Well, that's a great question. I think you'll probably have It's a great question. At some point, it probably makes sense to have like a bean root pool of some sort, and then you can have everything priced in beans. Because at the end of the day, you probably want, although I could be wrong on this, you probably want like the pod marketplace and the deposit marketplace and the fertilizer marketplace, all of those to be priced in beans and not instead of roots. That would be what I would think.
Would that depend on how big is the market cap, or by market cap I mean the amount that it's liquid? So it depends on the size of the beans that are available to be used, or the roots that are available to be used.
Yeah, and I mean, frankly, don't think it's likely that root becomes like a huge part of bean liquidity, although maybe we're totally wrong on that front. But hopefully things are built in a way where deposits and plots are sufficiently easily integrable such that you don't need an ERC20 wrapper for everything. And you can just use your deposits and use your plots. And then everything just is denominated in beans. And once you have liquid stock, I think it's also much easier to denominate your deposits in BDV because you have some premium of stock which you could liquidate, or you can always withdraw the beans. So there's probably going to be a deposit market. I mean, at the end of the day, it makes sense to denominate things in the stable coin itself, whereas root is going to continue to increase in value over time. It probably makes sense to denominate things in beans, which is what people still care about dollars. So beans are pegged to a dollar. It probably makes sense to denominate things in beans.
Johnny asks, and he's bringing up the idea or the thought of changing or rebalancing the unripe asset seeds. And he asks if we need to find a coder to implement that. And that is correct, Johnny. And if you can recommend or find or know someone that can help with that, please reach out to the team.
So from our perspective, we're more than happy to help with that process, but implementing like a short-term change to the seeds, that's not a focus of ours. We're obviously happy to help anyone that wants to work on that, but that's not something that we're going to do ourselves. However, as part of the general upgrade to the silo that hopefully should be ready in Q1 or sometime that Beanstalk Farms is working on at the moment, that should facilitate a change in the seeds per BDV. So at the moment, you could say that is in development, but for sometime late Q1 probably. And if someone wanted to work on that as a short-term fix, we'd be happy to help facilitate that type of BIP, but aren't currently working on it. So to answer you explicitly, yes, it would be great if someone wanted to step up and try to dev that themselves, and we'd obviously help out.
Austin asks, if you denominate a bet on a root market in beans rather than roots, how do you benefit from the positive carry of beans?
You wouldn't per se. You denominate it in roots in that case. That's the reason to implement roots. The thing that you might want to do is bet your deposits, and then you can bet the underlying PDV. You can bet the stock. In theory, you should be able to bet just the yield during the time that things have been bet. There's lots of different ways that you could want to bet things in a fully composable universe, but certainly to start, in order to get the yield in an easy way, it makes sense to use roots.
Johnny asks, what is roots? Roots is a fungible deposit. So now that you have beans deposited in the silo, you can transfer them in the future, hopefully to a root contract, and then you would get a fungible FDBDV, or what we call as roots, and then you can use that elsewhere to do other things, starting with doing things in the root protocol or the root market. So going back again, Publius, to that, then, if roots are the only way to, let's say, use deposits in the silo, and then the majority of beans are in the silo, then you'd expect protocols that want to utilize that to denominate in roots and not in beans. Is that correct?
Correct.
If everything stays as is.
Until there's a way to easily use deposits, it definitely makes sense to denominate things in roots.
All right. Okay. We're at the end of the town hall questions or chat again, so let's give it some time, and if others have more questions on what we've been discussing or anything else, feel free to drop it there. Maybe Austin follows up and he says that he's not sure how stable the root price would be. Do you want to comment on that, Publius? How would the price of roots change, or how do you expect it to change?
Sure. So as we understand, so root's currently being audited, and that version of the root token basically makes it such that you can deposit any deposit, and the root tokens that you receive is a function of when you mint the root tokens. Anyone can mint them, anyone can redeem them. When you mint the root tokens that you receive based on the deposits that you give to the contract to mint roots is the minimum of the change in percentage BDV of the contract, the percentage of stock, and the percentage of seeds. And therefore, unless you're adding deposits at the exact ratio of BDV to stock to seeds that the contract currently has, and it works similarly on the redemption, you're basically leaking value anytime you mint or redeem to the people that stay in the contract. The result is that you'd expect root, because root's also earning bean yield, that the root token would basically trade where there's some base BDV of the contract below which it wouldn't trade below. So the value of roots would be some equivalent to the beans that are underlying it, plus some premium you'd expect because of the additional stock or seeds on that BDV that have been leaked by people on mints or redemptions. Now, you can envision a world where roots trade at a discount to the BDV very briefly, but because of the ability to redeem, you wouldn't really expect that to happen for any extended period of time, because you could redeem an average at the exact ratio and then sell for beans. So you wouldn't really expect it to trade at a discount per se, because there's some arbitrage there, but because of the illiquidity of deposits right now, there's no deposit market where you could really get liquidity without burning the stock. Maybe that wouldn't be the case. So maybe you could have a situation where the root token traded at a discount to the BDV, but you'd probably expect it, if things were healthy, to trade at a slight premium.
And also follows up, how would silo rewards be claimed for all deposits sitting in the root contract?
Anyone can call the earn function on behalf of root, and then root just earns its beans, and it's basically distributed across all of the root tokens. And there's no increase in the number of root tokens, but there is an increase in the BDV per root. So that would result in an increase of in the beans per root in terms of price.
And then you can claim basically that root for the underlying beans, which you would expect it to be more than one, or more than one bean. Publius, can you help us understand how revitalized stock and seeds are calculated? So when the price of beans or the price of bean was below 1, farmers noticed that revitalized stock and seed increased. Can you help us understand the relationship and why did that happen, or why does it change basically?
I'm going to ask that Publius hops up here and helps me out here if possible, because I don't want to butcher this.
Okay, I think he's not with us, so maybe we'll ask that question or get that answered at another time.
Yeah, apologies. I didn't have a chance to really look into the answer there since it was asked, but know that it was answered, and so just haven't had the bandwidth. Apologies for that.
That's fine. All right, we will give it a few more minutes if others have other questions. And once again, it can be about anything, whether we discussed it or not.
All right, so I'm looking at the white paper, and the thing that changed is the percentage of fertilizer that was sold because of the converts, as I understand it. So perhaps next time Publius can give a more thorough, either I'll do it or they'll do it, but the punchline is that there was a change in the percentage of fertilizer sold, which is a function of the number of LP tokens that there are, or bean 3 curve LP tokens that there are, and because there was an unripe conversion, that changed the percentage of fertilizer that was sold, such that there was a change in the revitalized Stalk and Seeds.
That is also my understanding, because it looks at the value of the LP token or the BDV of it, and that changes. But we'll wait for the answer.
Yeah, this is section 7.3.1 and 7.3.2 in the white paper for people that are interested. Just that it's so hard to read that I got to read it before I talk about it. Apologies. Even though I wrote it, so it's like a joke, but it's just too many variables.
Yeah, I think there'll be a few smiles there if Publius thinks that about the white paper. Then no hard feelings to others.
It's not intentional. It's as simple as humanly possible, but it's like it's very painful. These formulas were so complicated to write properly, so now it's like this was months ago and kind of out of the brain. So sorry for having to review it quickly, but think that's generally how it works. And if we can give a more thorough walkthrough next class if people would find that helpful. definitely shout out in the town hall if people want that.
Okay, we'll see. Also suggests or thinks that it would be cool to have a format of the white paper where you can click and hover on variables and then learn what that is, rather than having to scroll all the way down to the glossary.
Definitely. That's a great idea.
Okay, I think we're at the end of the questions for today's class. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And Publius, as always, thank you for taking the time to answer all these questions.
Thank you, Mod. Take care.
Bye-bye.